I want to take a look at what Colin Cowherd had to say on his podcast last night after the Packers-Lions game. The Packers losing 24-14 to the Lions. I have not listened to this yet. He's talking with John Middlecoff on his podcast. John Middlecoff has a 3-and-Out podcast. I enjoy listening to him as well. He's a former scout. But I'm going to play this, and I'll sort of give my thoughts throughout it, sort of see if they're feeling the same way about the Packers that I'm currently feeling. So here we go on the Colin Cowherd podcast last night.
Okay, Detroit beats Green Bay 24-14. Brian Branch got ejected for the Lions in the first half, and I thought,
Can't happen.
I was like, oh my God, it didn't matter. It was 17-3 at half. Jordan Love had a pick six. I thought Jordan Love today was really sloppy. Now, it was raining hard when it started. It got worse. But I think you and I would agree that we thought that was an advantage for Green Bay.
Totally.
And Goff is like 17-21. This is, I think we just have to be honest here. Detroit's the best team in the league. Kansas City's got the trophy room. The team I'm watching now, the way they play, I mean, Green Bay had 10 penalties. Jordan Love had a pick six. I mean, he missed a lot of open throws. Again, some of it's weather. But when you watch Green Bay's youth and talent, and then you watch, remember, Detroit now, those guys aren't as old as San Francisco, but the Lions are older, more mature. They marched into Lambeau today, and it was the grown-ups and the really talented kids. Like, I thought they just put a foot on them really early.
Do you know what I wrote down is about when they really took hold of that game? In that weather and a driving rainstorm, it reminded me of the Belichick-Brady teams when they would play a team in awful weather, and you would just look up. It's like they are manhandling this team. And historically, this is their first outdoor game of the year, and Goff has been not a very good outdoor player. But I do wonder if you remember that night game, Aaron Rodgers' last game, he outplayed Aaron Rodgers. I mean, thoroughly outplayed him in a early January game. I wonder if he's a different part of having Dan Campbell, like a Harbaugh brother, like a Tomlin uplifting you, that even that extra confidence. They look like a completely different squad. Once Jordan Love to me, I don't want to harp too much on the Brian Branch thing. That cannot happen. We can't be throwing players out. One of my biggest pet peeves in the world is the college thing.
Yeah.
Throwing 99% of these kids will not play in the NFL and throwing them out. In the NFL, I got no problem throwing a 15-yard penalty. But Brian Branch is now their best defensive player and throw him out. Yeah. And it didn't even matter. And that
I'll touch on that for a quick second, that penalty. I shared on Twitter my thoughts while it was happening, but honestly, if any late hit, helmet-to-helmet hit that I've seen this season while watching the NFL, I think that Brian Branch, if any of them, deserved to be ejected for that. And I get, the idea of not wanting to eject anyone, but the ball, wasn't really, it was a late hit, and it was a clear, it wasn't one of those plays where so often happen where it's just so fast that it's hard for lots of these defensive players not to, get their head away. They're basically right on them. The ball's just gets there. They hit him at the same time. And at those moments, I'm like, okay, I get why they call the penalty, but doesn't really look very intentional. This one looked like a clear intentional targeting. It was pretty late. And so I get the ejection in this situation. If you're the refs, sort of what you have to do. So that's my thought on that.
That's what go back to the Belichick Patriot thing. It's like you could have removed players. They got you in that moment. And the Lions indoor team, are they kind of like the greatest show on turf in the early No, they kind of have it both. They got that, and they kind of got this Patriots. Even Brady during the game, he's like, listen, this guy has been the most accurate stretch in 3 games, NFL history, but in this driving rainstorm, you never believe it. And he shows the thing. He's 11 for 11. How is he doing this? And he's been the opposite his whole career. It's been not a inclement weather guy. And today he looked very comfortable. Obviously, Jordan Love's banged up. I thought they should have yanked him at halftime and gone to the other kid. But
yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think they should have put Malik in to start the second half after seeing how immobile Jordan Love was. He was able to run around a bit later on, but he was clearly being held back by that groin injury. And, I thought it was fine to play Jordan Love to start the game because I thought if they put him out there, they have a confidence that he can do enough. But then seeing him run around after that pick six, it just wasn't looking good for Love. And, that was obviously a very big factor. And the biggest thing in this one, they're talking about Goff. The Packers hurt themselves time and time again. Penalties, pick six, dropped passes, and the Lions just played a clean football game, a better football game. The Packers had more yards, but the Lions weren't making stupid mistakes. Jared Goff, he only had 145 passing yards, but he was not making any mistakes. He didn't throw the ball past 20 yards once. They didn't really have to do much because the Packers sort of handed it to them. They played a good game, but they just played a clean football game where the Packers, it was the opposite of a clean game for the Packers.
But it wouldn't have mattered much at that point in time. Once he threw that pick six and it's 17-3, didn't it feel like the game was over? I mean, it was going to be hard to score a touchdown in general.
Well, it's really hard, when a defense can't get traction with their feet and we have the better offensive line. I mean, there was a moment, Jahmyr Gibbs had a touchdown run to make it 24-3. The size of the hole for Jahmyr Gibbs, and I'm not joking, it was wider than this desk. It may have been. You
would have scored.
It was 8 feet. I mean, literally, Penei Sewell had moved his guy near the sideline. Brady's like, he's like, look at these tackles. Their offensive line. It rivals that Eagles team when Lane Johnson was healthy and Kelsey about 4 years ago when they were both the best at their position. They are moving. And the Packers defense has been pretty good this year. They moved it all day in the first half.
Okay, when we look at the rushing game for the Lions in this one, there were some plays, especially when Jahmyr Gibbs was running the ball, where he averaged 5.9 yards a carry. He only had 11 carries, and all in all for the day, the Packers only allowed 3.9 yards a carry. So honestly, it wasn't that bad a day for the Packers running defense. I think near the end of it was either first quarter or second quarter, they were getting gashed, and Jahmyr Gibbs was, making the defense look silly there. But for the most part, the Packers' run defense wasn't terrible. I honestly think the Packers' defense did enough in this game. You take away the pick six because that's not the defense's fault. It's only 17 points for the Lions. It was a wet game, a sloppy game in the conditions there. But I think for how good the Lions' offense has been this year, the Packers' defense did enough. The offense was what held them back in this one.
We've been talking a lot about Jordan Love and, comparing him. Listen, it's a good thing when Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre's names are coming up. But this was a game in that weather where you cannot turn the ball over. Like, it cannot happen. You have to dominate on the run, running the ball, control the clock, and play defense. And he did a play, which he's done earlier this season, reckless. You cannot afford to be reckless. That's why the Patriots in those games dominated. Brady would never turn the ball over, let alone make a play like that. And even Tom was like, you cannot do that. He tried to lob it over. I don't even know really what he was trying to do. You can't barely grip the ball. He is, I've said before, you asked me, I think a couple weeks ago, could they win the Super Bowl? And I said, they do have the talent, but he is way too much of a roller coaster ride.
There was a moment, there was a 2nd and 1, and Brady called him out. And Brady said, dude, it's 2nd and 1. You got 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. You're trailing. You're going to go for it.
And you got a great running back.
And he's rolling right, and he's pump faking, and it's just like Brady. I don't think he wants to be hypercritical of young quarterbacks, but it was like, and I like Jordan a lot, but there are times he's always been more Favre than Rodgers, where he's gonna sling it, and I do think against Detroit you may have to because Detroit's got better personnel and they're older, but I kind of feel like today's a moment that you'll look at during the season and we'll revisit this. I think Jordan is going to have another one of these games later, and we'll go back and there was early warning signs because I really, really like him. And Reed is a remarkable young receiver. He's good. But they looked young and sloppy today.
Yeah, I 100% agree there with Colin, and that's the whole thing with Jordan Love and these interceptions. If they want to find success and be able to, win multiple playoff games and go to a Super Bowl, Jordan Love can't be playing football like this. He needs to get more into the form that he was in later last season when he stopped throwing a ton of interceptions. And I shared this on Twitter early this morning. Jordan Love, after 9 Packers games last season, 14 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Jordan Love, after 9 Packers games this season, missed 2 of them, 15 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. And so early on last year, Love was struggling. He wasn't making the best decisions. He was putting the ball into harm's way a lot. And we've seen a lot of that to start this season. Now, last year he was able to turn it around, and the final 8 games threw 1 pick. And so I think the hope is that he can somehow stop making all these bad decisions, and maybe this one was enough to make him go, or really make him be less risky when it comes to some of these throws he's making where he just takes a sack in that situation where he got the pick 6. Hopefully that's what happens, because if the Packers want to, consistently be able to win a few games in the playoffs, and go to a Super Bowl, you can't have all these interceptions, especially when you're playing really good offenses where you can't really, have a few big mistakes like this and still plan to win the game. But last year he was able to turn it around. Hopefully this year he can as well, and hopefully he'll get healthy.
They really do. Listen, I throw these names around when we're talking about these guys, but Rodgers and Favre have a combined 7 most valuable players. I mean, I think, and I'm as guilty as anyone. And LaFleur brings it up. This kid has a long way to go. Like, can you just make back-to-back Pro Bowls? And you have games like today where you're at home. It's a huge advantage for you, and you take your team right out of the game. You're not going to be able to throw 3 touchdowns. And I say this all the time about the Packers. They get some of these home games, and the weather just turns to. I mean, I'm looking around the league today. The weather's not that terrible in most places. A little cold. It is awful there, and you're just not going to be able. You're probably going to give up your defense might score a touchdown. You're going to have to run the ball, and the Lions are just a better version of that right now. They're just a better version of a team that can play ugly than the Packers. Clearly, that's a rough L because I think that. It'd be stunning now if the Lions don't win that division, right? And all signs point to them being the number 1 seed in the NFC.
Honestly, when you look at this game, the way that Malik Willis played in his 2 games starting, and even how he played against the Jacksonville Jaguars, where it was more predicated on the running game and Malik just making a ton of very good decisions, being very efficient, not turning the ball over, almost how Jared Goff played a little bit today. That's sort of what has happened when Malik Willis has been in there. And I really do wonder, because the Packers defense had a somewhat solid day, I would say, against the best offense in the NFL, I feel like the Packers would have been closer in this one if Malik Willis was playing. And the big thing is Jordan Love's injury. And I'm sort of thinking right now, the Packers do have a bye, so hopefully he can get fully recovered by the time they play the Bears about 2 weeks from now. But if Jordan Love is still dealing with a lingering groin injury, and I don't even know if his knee is still bothering him, who knows, but if he goes into the Bears game and it's even a somewhat of a concern, I think you should rest him, because I think Malik Willis is good enough to keep the Packers in games. And if Jordan Love doesn't recover from these injuries, or the groin injury, whatever is bothering him the most, if he doesn't recover from this fully by the time the end of the season comes around and he's still dealing with some nagging injuries come playoff time, I mean, you just need to have Jordan Love at full health and full strength. And so I was fine with him playing this game. It seemed to bother him more than I thought it would have if they would have given him the chance to play. And it could have been that he re-aggravated again as he was trying to run around, things like that. But Jordan Love needs to be healthy. And so I think the Packers need to really consider that moving forward. But that's pretty much all I have for this video. I appreciate you guys watching. As always, if you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below. And I'll see you guys next time.